situation that we have now with the pandemic. So I am now going to hand over the floor to Eric Garcetti. I would like to thank Eric for the great work that he is achieving at the C40. So the mayors will be acting hand in hand until the Glasgow conference in order to really live up to the hopes of our citizens. We obviously want to be efficient and we want to act for the common good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello from the City of Angels.
Gracias a mi hermana, Anne Hidalgo. Thank you. And it is wonderful to be with my friends in Paris, especially my dear sister, mon sœur, and mi hermana. We speak a lot of Spanish to each other. It's our common language. But it is such a joy to be back in Paris with you. I so much wish I could be there in person in a year that has been full of so much pain and loss and suffering. But thank you, Mayor Hidalgo, for your courage, not just in the face of a pandemic, but a global crisis that was before 2020 and will last after 2020 in our climate crisis. And all that you do to push us to make our ambitions bigger in the race to zero. And let me add as well my thank you to Jean-Christophe Tortora and La Tribune for helping organize this event. I can't believe it's been 5 years since we were in Paris, standing with the power of the mayors that were on the steps of the Paris City Hall. It was one of the most moving and emotional experiences of my professional life, to see the entire world, every village and town and city unified to meet the crisis of our life. And so much has happened since then. That experience is so vivid, the power of our commitment. I felt how significant and urgent it was. And most of all, I knew that we were the ones, cities around the world, who could make this promise real for the nations of this globe. Cities are where agreements signed by nations become action in our communities. Whether you're talking about the US-China Climate Leaders Summit in 2015, which was one of the largest agreements between nations or cities before Paris, or the C40 World Mayors Summit that was held a year later, where the Deadline 2020 program was launched, thanks in large part to the leadership of Mayor Hidalgo. Cities are now where more than half of the world's population lives, and cities account for more than 70% of global carbon dioxide emissions. We see the most devastating impacts of climate change, from fires in my city to floods in other ones. But it's also there where we're taking the aggressive action to turn the tide, where we can see not just the horror, but the hope as well. Our numbers speak for themselves. 54 C40 cities are on track to meet their Paris Agreement targets and to do their part to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 54 cities, compared to just 2 countries right now who are on track, Morocco and the Gambia. So cities are leading, inspiring nations to catch up. And here's the thing, in the face of this global pandemic of COVID, in the face not just of a public health crisis, but an economic crisis, we're not slowing down. In fact, we are accelerating. We're doubling down on our values because we know it's the only way out of this moment. We're coming together, as we always do, to map out the steps, to be friends and friendly competitors, and who can do more to get there faster. Earlier this year, as the severity of the COVID pandemic became apparent, I created a C40 Global Mayors COVID-19 Recovery Task Force that Mayor Giuseppe Sala of Milan chaired. But we had representatives from every continent of the world. And its charge was to outline concrete steps forward for cities to rebuild and reimagine their economies in the wake of COVID-19. And the task force was crystal clear about one thing. Any national stimulus plan must be a green stimulus plan and based on the principles of our global Green New Deal. Because as we protect people's lives from COVID, we can save hundreds of thousands of lives from premature death by tackling air pollution. We can create 50 million global, good-paying green jobs. And we can save $1.4 billion in healthcare costs. And we can cut our greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. My friends, we have to act now, not in some distant shore or across an ocean, but where we live. It was Eleanor Roosevelt who once said that human rights there mean nothing if they don't mean something where we live, where we pray, where we study, where we work. And it's the same thing when it comes to global warming. There's no time to waste, and this decade will define human civilization, whether our children and grandchildren not only have a healthy Earth, but an equitable Earth and an economy that they have a place in. The stakes could not be higher. And I could not be more confident that cities will be at the front of the pack in 2021, setting the bar higher and higher. And thank you, Mayor Hidalgo, for welcoming America back after the election. Because I know our incoming president, one of the first acts he will take is to rejoin the Paris Agreement. But while America was withdrawing from that, 548 cities in 48 of our 50 states said, if our current president was getting out of Paris, we are getting in. So don't worry, we've been continuing. And next year, when we gather in Glasgow, the mayors of at least 1,000 cities, mirroring what we did in Paris City Hall, large and small, will commit to bold climate action, a Paris 2.0, if you will, to build a global movement made up of business and labor and youth leaders, forging a bright path forward, inspiring nations to act with the same urgency that we feel in cities. You know, I began, and I'll close, looking back to 5 years ago, to that remarkable moment standing on the steps of Paris City Hall with hundreds of my colleagues from across the globe. I want to close by challenging you to imagine the future. Close your eyes and picture your city 5 and 10 years from now. Will your bus fleet be 100% electric? What percentage of power in your city will be carbon emitting, and what percentage will be carbon zero? How much of your waste will be diverted from landfills or recycled? How many kilometers of bike lanes will there be? How many new trees have you planted 5 years from now? And answering those questions can't start on the eve of COP31 5 years from now. It begins today, now. Here, this is the time for transformational climate action. Now is the time to join C40 and the city's Race to Zero campaign and to help us recruit other cities in building a movement that will save our planet. Thank you, Foreign Minister, to the Mayor. Thank you to France for being an incredible leader in this movement. Thank you to the mayors of the world that are inspiring national leaders to be brave. And I know that we will accomplish the goals we have set out in the declaration that we are about to sign, and help secure this future that is defined by a healthy planet for ourselves, by our children and our grandchildren. After all, as the poet once wrote, a man or a woman's reach must always exceed their grasp. In other words, we reach for things we might not be able to hold. That is the history of humanity, that one generation does something for the next and the next. And the second line of that poem says, after all, what is a heaven for? And I would say, after all, why else are we here? Thank you, Mayor Hidalgo. Thank you to France. Thank you to my fellow mayors. And let's get the job done.
Merci au président du C40. Merci à Eric Garcetti, au maire de Los Angeles.
Thank you to the president of C40. Thank you, Mr. Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles. I would like now to ask Mrs. Hidalgo, Mr. Jean Le Drian to come and sign the Paris Declaration.
Voilà, à ce stade,